Yes, Mr. Phillip. Well, the witness will be along in a second, I think.
Right.
All right?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Ms. Smith, thank you for coming back. We were on the subject of fire survival guidance calls, and I'm going to come back to that subject in a moment and explore it in some more detail by reference to policy. Before I do, can I just take a very short detour back to a subject we were looking at before lunch, which was calls and how they're recorded. Admin calls are telephone conversations,
Yes.
I think. And those admin calls are between, is this right, between Brigade Mobile in the control room and another telephone?
No, not a Brigade Mobile,
Sorry,
but just a
right.
telephone call from
Right.
Brigade Control or being received by Brigade Control, not through a 999 line.
I see. Sorry, I've already introduced a confusion. I'm sorry about that. So an admin call, is it landline to landline?
In Control, yes.
In control?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a specific telephone set, is there, in Brigade Control?
There's some specific telephone numbers connected to our ICS
I follow.
that are for admin use.
Right. And who would have access to those?
All control staff
All
logged on to the mobilising system.
Okay. And do those admin calls, or where a call is made on an admin line, would they include calls made to or from that admin telephone from a mobile?
Yes.
So if somebody was calling Brigade Control on that number from a mobile, it would be an admin call and would be recorded?
Yes.
Right. And similarly, a call from that from Brigade Control on that line to a mobile would also be recorded?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Now, we've got some evidence, I think, to come from Mr. Olive, and Mr. Merrick yesterday gave evidence about about calls he was receiving on a mobile that was attached to his belt.
Yes.
Are those admin calls, or would they be different?
So,
What are they?
I believe Jason Olive was using his personal or his brigade issue mobile phone to make contact with the command unit.
Yes. And
there would have been two reasons for that. He wouldn't have been able to log on to our telephone system in control because it's just for control room operator access. So he wouldn't have been able to direct dial to one of the command units or to the incident ground using that method. And secondly, I think he was tasked by OM Norman to pass on that information. It is very quick by voice, and also with him doing it, it freed up one control officer to remain taking 999 calls.
Right. And just in terms of the equipment available in the command unit, or in any command unit, we heard Mr. Merrick speak of his mobile, but is there also a telephone in the command unit?
Yes, I believe so. And we have the command unit telephone numbers on our mobilising system, so we can dial them.
Right. And are those mobile network telephones, or are they a radio telephone?
Mobile network telephones.
Okay. And does the command unit or a command unit also have a main scheme radio?
Yes.
I see. So if I was in a command unit and I wanted to make a call out or receive a call in from Brigade Control, it could be done, is this right, through one of three routes? Mobile to mobile, such as Olive to Merrick.
Yes.
RT4.
Via the radio.
Via radio. Or Brigade telephone to command unit telephone through the designated number.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's common practice at an incident. When a command unit is on scene, we would call the command unit direct and speak to them.
Right. And of those three methods of communication, which ones are recorded?
The radio traffic
Yes.
that would go, and the admin call dialing out from our IX to the command unit.
Right. And finally, on this question of communications and recording, if a senior officer used his or her airwave radio to speak to another senior officer on their airwave radio, would that be recorded?
No.
Right. Can I turn then back to the question of stay put? And I want to show you a document you may or may not have seen before. Can I ask you to turn to tab 28, or LFB quadruple 01905? This is a document called Organisational Overview, produced by the London Fire Brigade on the 9th of April, 2018. Can I ask you first of all, Ms. Smith, are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I have seen it.
You've seen it. Did you have any part in compiling it?
No.
Okay. Can I ask you to turn to page 9, page 8 internally, page 9 of the relativity reference, and look at paragraph 8. It's, I think, the page before. So it's page 8 internally, page 9, that's it. And under paragraph 8, you can see the rubric, stay put and fire survival guidance. And I just want to show you the first two paragraphs, 8.1 and 8.2 there. It says the stay put and fire survival guidance, FSG advice, is normally provided by brigade control staff when a caller indicates that they are trapped by a fire and or unwilling to leave the property without assistance. The advice given in these circumstances is based upon the established national stay-put principles, which are predicated on the expectation that a residential high-rise premises are constructed and maintained in accordance with statutory fire safety and building control requirements. And then you've got a reference to the national stay-put policy and the local government group guidance, which I think is GRA 3.2. And it says, it states, para 12.1, page 20, that when a fire occurs within one dwelling or less likely in the common parts, it is normally safe for other residents to remain within their own flat. This principle is undoubtedly successful in an overwhelming number of fires in blocks of flats. Now, first of all, I mean, obviously you're not familiar with this document, so I'm not going to ask you about the document, but I just want to ask you about the principles. My first question is, do you agree from your experience with what is set out there in paragraph 8.1?
I would have rephrased it a different way and made it a bit clearer. So I would have said fire survival guidance advice is provided by brigade control when a caller indicates they are trapped by fire and unwilling to leave the property. With regard to high-rise, the question that is on our policy 539, that you are usually safe if you're not affected by fire, heat or smoke, but if the situation changes, call us back, rather than classing it as a stay put, blanket stay put advice.
That's very helpful, thank you. That's quite a, yes, that's very helpful. So I think you're saying that actually the move from stay put to evacuate is a more subtle, case-specific one.
Yes.
Right. What is your understanding of what advice should be given to callers who call from a high-rise block once the control room operator knows that compartmentation has been compromised elsewhere in the block?
Elsewhere in the block,
Yes.
I would say the advice would remain the same, that we would speak to the caller, we would assess the situation, we would ask if they are being affected by fire, heat or smoke, we would ask if they could leave the premise, and they would normally say that they couldn't because of smoke in the corridor or another means that is stopping them leaving, and then we would give advice and try and protect the caller.
Right. And that would depend. Would that depend then again on the assessment being made by the caller as to the conditions they were experiencing?
Yes.
Rather than on anything known or seen or heard by the control room officer, CRO?
Yes, that would be on information from the caller. So even though a change or a move to a different room or try a different tactic would depend on what the caller was saying to the control operator about the conditions within their premise.
Right. Now, given what you've said about how you might change or qualify paragraph 8.1, this question I'm about to ask you is hypothetical, but nonetheless I'd like just to get your experience, if you can help me with it. What would a control room officer advise a caller who was calling and saying, well, I'm not at the moment affected by heat, smoke or fire,
Then
but the control room operator knows that the fire is spreading very rapidly through the building? What would happen then?
So the advice would be that you're usually safer to remain where you are, but if the situation changes, then dial 999 and call us back.
Right. So the change in the situation would be, again, coming back to the same point, something to be assessed by the caller,
Yes.
and not by the control room operator.
No.
Right. Can I just take you back then to paragraph 8.2 of this document we're still on, and the reference there to the local government group guidance, fire safety and purpose-built blocks of flats. I should ask you directly, are you familiar with that local government group guidance?
I don't know when that was updated. I'm familiar of the local government guidance, which was issued in 2009 after the Lacanau investigation, 2011.
Okay, we may be looking at the same thing, we may not. Can I just ask you then to be shown the GRA, Generic Risk Assessment 3.2, tab 7 of the policies bundle, which is LFB quadruple 41255. And the front page of that is, and I think it's maybe a different document, but my first question is, are you familiar with this document?
I'm not familiar with it. I've seen it, but I wouldn't know
Right.
the detail of its content.
Okay, that's very. I'm not going to ask you about the document. If you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to ask you about the document itself, but I just want to ask you one or two questions about it, about the principles in it. If I can just ask you to be shown page 18 internally. So I'm not asking you about the language or how the document came about or anything like that, just the principles. And can we highlight the passage that starts fire survival guidance, 4 paragraphs down, that's it, and all 4 bullet points. It says, fire survival guidance call arrangements should include, and then there are 4 bullet points, details of how calls will be passed to and recorded at the incident, their impact on resources in mobilising, a re-evaluation process to ensure the balance of risk to the public is reviewed if circumstances change, which may result in a change to the advice previously given, and then how information will be exchanged between callers, fire control and commanders at the incident. Now first, and I should have shown you the date of this policy was 2014. Are you aware, or were you aware in June 2017, that those principles should apply to fire survival guidance call arrangements?
Yes, I was aware of the principles. I wasn't aware that that was written in that document.
Okay. In terms of the principles, I want to just focus on the third one, the re-evaluation process to ensure the balance of risk to the public is reviewed, as if circumstances change. Would you agree that it is important to re-evaluate fire survival guidance advice that's being given as you go?
Yes, and I believe that would have come from one of the outcomes of the Lacanau investigation,
Okay.
and that would have been put in.
Yes, and we saw that from policy 539, I think.
Yes.
To reassess. So that's what you would be familiar with as reassessment in policy
Yes.
539.
Yes.
Okay.
And regards to the brackets, which may result in a change to the advice previously given,
Yes.
that was an item that Control wanted to be placed into policy 790
And was it?
regarding, yes, changing the advice to callers in high-rise buildings.
Right. We'll come to that very shortly. And maybe taking this out of order, but that change in advice my question is, what circumstances would you, as a control room officer or supervisor, consider would require the advice to be changed from stay put to evacuate if you can?
For a control room operator,
Yes.
I wouldn't expect that decision to be theirs. I would have expected them, they're busy dealing with calls, talking to the callers, calming those callers down, providing advice that is current at the moment. I wouldn't expect that to be a decision that they would have made. The supervisors, especially if we're referring to the night, were again trying to assist with call handling, trying to mobilise a vast number of resources, make cover moves, ensure that everyone that needed to know was informed.
Right.
So with regard to individuals, they were working, they were task orientated. I wouldn't have expected them to have an overview of what was going on with the whole control room. Whilst control officers are very good at listening, talking to a caller and overhearing other conversations, so they're able to keep an eye on what's going on overall in the room. I wouldn't expect it to, with that huge call volume coming in, that anyone would have had an overall picture of what was going on specifically, and providing specific advice to individuals, yes, but not overall picture of what was happening.
I follow. Okay. Just going back a little bit into that answer and going back to this principle, a re-evaluation process which may result in a change to the advice. First of all, who in the taking the control room, first of all, who would be responsible for deciding whether there should be a change in the advice?
I was on the night.
I
was on the night.
On that night, yes.
Yes.
And that's ordinarily the case, is it? The senior operations manager?
I would have expected it to come from one of the brigade senior managers, and
Okay.
yes.
And we're going to come on later to how that decision did come to be made. But just in terms of, at the moment, I'm just looking at policy and how things
Yes.
normally work. So are you saying it would normally be an SOM who would make that change or make that decision?
In conjunction with the operations manager,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's the next question. The re-evaluation process would be done, would it by the SOM in conjunction with the control room officer who's actually handling the call?
I would read that the re-evaluation process would happen on every call, with every control room officer talking to that caller, providing fire survival guidance.
Right.
But it would only be some supervisors, if they weren't involved in mobilising additional tasks, or the operations manager or myself, that would be able to get an overview of what individual control room officers are advising and telling callers and the situation.
Okay. And you may have answered this already, but let's see if I can just get it in a slightly different way. If I'm a control room officer, I'm handling a 999 call, which isn't being listened in on by an OM or an SOM or an AOM, I'm on my own.
Yeah.
What information am I looking out for from the caller which might trigger a change in advice? What flag?
With regard to fire survival guidance
Yes.
calls? Yes, so the worsening of conditions, having to, whilst they're reassuring, if they keep re-evaluating, they're checking on the conditions, so maybe it would have been heavily smoke logged when they started, or maybe light smoke logging, but during the time those conditions have worsened, they may be able to hear different noises, such as the fire. They may report signs of flame, that
Right.
sort of.
And would those sorts of things be something that a CRO would be trained to listen out for?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they would listen to all the information the callers providing to them.
Right. So you listen to, of course it's based on experience, but,
Yes.
but really what I'm trying to get at is, are there any special indicators which would take, during the re-evaluation process, which would take a CRO over the line, as it were, from saying, well, you can stay put, you're still safe to stay where you are, to putting their hand up and saying, I need help here, I think we may need to change the advice.
There's no specific, like you say, it would be triggers, it would be a deterioration of the conditions.
Right.
And again, not specifically for high-rise, but with domestic dwellings, low-rise, on the callers trapped in fire on the first floor, they have specific instructions how to be rescued and how to help self-rescue.
Yes. Okay. Now, that's just staying with that question of change to the advice previously given. We've covered the control room. What if would the incident ground play any role in a decision by you as SOM to change the advice previously given?
Yes.
What would that be?
I would say
What
that that would be a joint discussion on how they are progressing on the incident ground and what in control we are experiencing and what conditions the callers are experiencing.
Okay, now that discussion, I think we can find mention of that in policy 790. If we could just look at that. It's tab 5 of the policy bundle. And can we go to paragraph 8.7 on page 5 internally? So this is policy 790, and I know you're
Yes.
familiar with this. 8.7, which sits within the paragraph starting advice to fire survival guidance callers, as we can see, it says, in exceptional circumstances, an IC, incident commander, may consider informing control that their advice to FSG callers should be altered, e.g. to attempt to leave their property. The IC should remember that this advice may be contrary to national policy for control staff on FSGs, and liaison with the officer in charge at control will be required for agreement to change the prescriptive advice. So when you were referring a moment ago to joint discussion with the incident ground, is that the policy that you're referring to?
Yes.
Now, in practical terms, that suggests that the incident command and control make the decision essentially jointly.
Yes.
I've suggested that, but is that actually right? It's a joint decision, or is it the decision by control based on what the incident ground is telling you?
Well, the policy says it's a decision by the IC at the incident. I think when it was first drafted, we had that it should be a decision between the IC or the officer in charge of control, depending on those circumstances.
Right. Okay. In terms of how this policy, we can read the policy, but in terms of how it's carried out in practice, when a change to FSG advice is altered from, say, stay put to escape, is the ultimate decision made by the control room, or is it a decision made by the incident commander, or is it a joint decision in practice?
In practice, it's only ever been done once, to my knowledge. And it was a decision made by control that the incident ground agreed with.
Right. And that's your own personal experience, is it?
Yes.
And which incident was that? Are you able to remember?
That would have been Grenfell.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. So, do I take it from that prior to Grenfell, this paragraph 8.7 was never tested in practice?
Yes, that's right.
That's correct. Right. Okay. And just before I leave that point, does that mean that in an ordinary case, does that mean that there's never been a change as contemplated by the policy to FSG in your experience?
Yes, there's never been a change.
Okay, right. Now, can I then turn to what happens with FSGs in practice in terms of what CRAs do? when a call is determined to be an FSG call, what action do you expect a CRO to take? Just in general terms.
They will take the address, find that address on our gazetteer. They will type in some additional details of what the caller's saying. They will decide on the incident type. They will mobilise those resources. This is while they're all still on the telephone call to the caller. They will mobilise the additional fire survival guidance PDA that we have. They will alert a supervisor or their colleague next door, and those colleagues will carry out some additional actions such as informing the ambulance service and notifying some officers or senior officers, and they will also be able to access the reference information file that's available to them.
Right. Okay. Now I'll come to that in a moment. You mentioned the address.
Yes.
What about numbers of persons involved? Is that something that a CRO should obtain?
Yes, they will do that during the course of the telephone conversation. That's not unusual.
Right.
But that probably wouldn't be an initial action whilst they're carrying out the assessment of it. That would be part of their questioning, and then they would create a service request and pass that information to the en route resources.
Right. I think there may be an easier way for me to do this. Can I ask you to look at Policy 790, which is at tab 5 of the policy bundle, and look at paragraph 5.5, which sits within a section of this policy called information transfer to the incident. And at 5.4, I think this is where we should start. This is the page before. Yes. Just near the top of the page, do you see? It says 5.4. Control will contact the initial command pump, ICP, and pass the information below by appliance radio for each separate FSG call. When passing this information, control will reference the information using the relevant flat/house number. And then in 5.5, it says control will attempt to gather all the information on the control information form. And that's Appendix 2, which we have seen before, and relay this information to the incident as and when it becomes available. And then there's a list of pieces of information below it, which we can see.
Yes.
Would it be normal for a CRO, when gathering information from a caller, to take all that information in any event?
I think that the trouble with lists and having those information, that is ideally what we'd like to gather, but the call handling, when we call handle, it's not a linear process. You wouldn't go through step by step asking those questions. You'd be able to respond to what the caller was telling you, and if they needed reassurance for a minute or two, then you would provide that rather than carrying on regardless with the questioning. So yes, that would be obtainable. We would attempt to ask, obviously, the number of the flat or the house to get the address, the number of people that are inside and involved, and the location. But sometimes, just because of what the caller's saying and our engagement with them, that doesn't always happen, or they're reluctant to give that information because they want to tell you about something else that's occurring.
Okay. And would this information be obtained or sought by the CRO only once the call had become FSG, or in any case?
Once the call has become a fire survival guidance call, yes, they would. They would ask some similar questions on just property fires.
Right.
They would ask if they believe there were people involved and things. So.
Okay. And there's a reference here, as you can see, to Appendix 2, which is the control information form.
Yes.
We can just go to that, if we can, just for a second. It's Appendix 2, which can be found internally in this document on page 8. Can we just have a look at that, please? Now, this form, which is becoming familiar, again, it's in quadruplicate, white, yellow, blue, and green. Who in the control room would fill that out?
So we have copies in the control room, but we don't use that because we put all that information onto our mobilising system and onto the incident log.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask you, as a matter of practice, does that mean you never use this form in the control room?
We may have done once or twice, but again, we can put all the information and the relevant information onto the mobilising system.
Okay. And that's the incident screen, is it?
Yes.
I see.
The incident log on Vision.
Yes, I see. Okay. And would that would that include, as per this information form, number of persons within a location?
Yes, if we had asked that and been given that, that would.
Right. Okay. So can we take it that the scheme of information required on the control information form is the kind of information that you would ordinarily expect a CRO to obtain from the caller when managing an FSG call?
Yes, it was created as a control information form to use for fire survival guidance, but I was involved in its creation, and it was also created in case we had another incident where we needed to take details of callers, but not necessarily in an FSG situation.
Right.
So, which is why we have access point written on there.
Right. And what does that mean, an access point? Is that...
So that would be if we took a call to, say, an underground train crash,
Right.
and we were receiving calls from people in different carriages, things like that, we could use, and the crews could use those forms to pass that information.
Right. And these control information forms, are they never used? Because you can download, type in the information?
Yes, it would sort of be like double keying.
Right.
We'd write it on here, and then we would also put it into the incident log. So it's
Right.
quicker for us to write it on our mobilising system. But they are used on appliances.
They're used on appliances?
Yes.
Okay. But I think you're just saying they're not used in the control room?
No.
Okay. Now, going back to paragraph 5.1 in this policy, I say back to 5.1, going back to paragraph 5 and looking at 5.1, that says, let's go back to it, it's the previous page, page 2, internally, page 2 of the document. As soon as control has confirmed that an FSG call is in progress, they will contact the incident ground and start to pass over the initial details. At this stage, it is likely to be basic information relating to the number of persons involved and their location within the property. How would, or what, by what means of communication would that initial set of initial details be transmitted to the incident ground?
Via the radio, via the main scheme radio.
Right. And is that policy or is that practice?
Practice.
Right. In fact, I should have shown you this. I think I've got the answer here anyway. Paragraph 5.4, just turning the page, says control will contact the initial command pump and pass the information below by appliance radio for each separate FSG call. So taking those two paragraphs together and your answer, radio, is the norm that as soon as you've got an FSG call, control will use the radio, RT4 if you're north of the river,
Yes.
to send that information to the initial command pump?
Yes. So that would be whilst the resources are en route. So before they arrived, it wouldn't be uncommon to start receiving and dealing with a fire survival guidance call.
Right.
And whilst the appliances are en route.
Okay. And in 5.1, there's a reference, as you can see at the beginning, to confirming that an FSG call is in progress. What does control do by way of confirmation that an FSG call is in progress?
So again, two actions. They'd mobilise the FSG, additional attendants, and they would inform
Right.
the attending resources by radio
Okay.
that an FSG call is in progress.
And is is it the supervisor who confirms that an FSG call is in progress, or is it the call handler?
No, it's the call
CRO?
handler. It's the
I see.
control operator taking the call.
Okay, and who does the call handler confirm that with? Is there a process of confirmation?
No, they would confirm that by what the caller has indicated and then providing advice to the caller.
Right. And so if it's a call handler who's on the telephone to the caller,
Yes.
and the call handler determines that that's an FSG,
Yeah.
that, do they send that message, they need to send that message by radio, do they send that message to the radio operator in the control room, as
Yes.
you described before,
Yeah.
and then that radio operator will send the message to the ICP?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I
They
understand.
will also alert their supervisor or their colleague
Right,
to tell them that.
okay. And what's the purpose of communicating that initial information to the fire ground?
So that they're aware
Aware of what?
that we are talking to a caller that is in the building that cannot leave.
Right. And what would you expect the incident ground to do with that information?
I would expect them to write it down on the control information pad, and that the incident commander would receive that.
Right. The incident commander would receive what?
That information about the fast survival guidance call-in process.
Okay. And would that be the piece of paper that you would expect the incident commander to receive?
It's really not my field of expertise going into incident command.
Okay.
I wouldn't, from a control room point of view,
Okay.
our aim is to pass all relevant information to the scene of operations
Right.
as quickly as possible.
Okay. Would you have any expectation or experience of how, once that initial FSG call information has got to the incident ground via the radio, what would happen to that information next?
No,
Okay.
I have
okay.
no experience of that.
All right. Now, you mentioned the RIF. Can we look at that together?
Yes.
I think there may be two, in fact.
There should be one for control operators and one for supervisors.
Yes. And can we... I'm going to start, if I can, with the supervisors. Which is in tab 9 of the policy bundle, which is, this is the first time I think we've looked at this. It's LFB quadruple 03541. I think it was up there before I finished that very long number. Is this the document that you're referring to?
Yes.
By the supervisor's RIF? Yes. And why do you call it a RIF, RIF?
It's called a reference information file.
Okay.
It's what was described in our old mobilising system, and we've just carried it through.
Right. And did you have any role in compiling or creating this guidance?
Yes, I have authorised several versions of this, but I'm not sure that's one I've authorised.
Right. Okay. Well, let me show you the end of this, because I hope we're on the right one. This is, if you go to the very last page, which is the third page of this document, this one is, as you can see at the very bottom, it's approved by SOM Baniel. I hope that's the right way of pronouncing it.
That would be Bagnall.
3rd of April 2014. Updated 2nd of April 2016. Is this the most recent version of that document?
Yes.
Now, I just want to ask you one or two questions about the contents of this. First of all, on page 2, in the bullet points there, you can see what is supposed to happen. So the first bullet point is CRA regularly reassesses the situation by asking questions as specified in FSG operator RIF. And I've looked at those. I think they're the same as those that are set out in the policy 790.
Yes.
Okay. And then supervisor or nominated person to consider a number of things. Dedicating a supervisor to act as sole contact point between control and ICP, CU or officer nominated by IC to pass all relevant information. Now, I'm not sure it's very well laid out, but does that mean that once an FSG is in play, a supervisor in the control room nominates somebody to be the sole contact point between control and the incident ground for the FSG?
Yes.
Right. What about multiple FSGs?
The same principle would apply.
Right. So you're going to have one person as the sole contact point between control and the incident ground?
Yes.
Do you know who that was on the night of Grenfell Tower?
That would have been Jason Olive.
That was Jason Olive. Right. Now, then it says using M2FH or FLONOPS 1, FLONOPS 1, if sufficient staff available, where a large number of FSG calls are being received, as this will free up the main scheme radio. What is M2FH?
So it's just an old analogue call sign for our radio channels that we have in London Fire Brigade.
And was that in use on the night of the Grenfell Tower fire?
No, we were using M2FN, which was Channel 4.
Okay, right. And what about FLONOPS 1?
So FLONOPS 1 it is another channel. It's just a channel 1 that we don't use for general messages,
right,
and radio communications. So it's a spare channel that we can use to free up, like I say, to free up the other channels. So all the Northern appliances are on that channel, so the different incidents will all come through that channel and that radio operator. I think what they're indicating here is that if we were busy with other incidents and we had a large amount of information to pass regarding FSG calls, we could move that on to channel 1 and pass that information that way. We wouldn't be disturbed by the other incidents.
Oh, I see. So I see. Did you use FLONOPS 1 on the night of the Grenfell Tower?
No.
Why is that?
Purely because we had established a really good communication system with Jason Olive, speaking directly to the command unit.
Yeah. Now, Jason Olive, you said, was the sole contact point between control and the ICP.
Yes.
So my first question is, did you appoint him the sole contact?
No.
Do you know who did?
Yes, I believe that was OM Alex Norman.
Alex Norman, right. Now, we have Jason Olive arriving in the control room at about 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's not an exact time, but about 2 o'clock, which I think was before you arrived.
Yes.
Do you know do you know who, if anyone, was the sole contact point between control and the fireground prior to Jason Olive's appointment as sole contact point?
That would have been the radio operator, Sharon Darby.
Sharon Darby?
Yes, so all the information would have gone via the radio before we switched to telephone.
I see. And who, if anybody, appointed Sharon Darby as the sole contact point between control and the incident ground?
She was the radio operator on
Right.
Channel 4 that night, for the whole night.
I see. And did she have particular skills, or was she appointed as part of a roll call?
Yes, just as part of a roll call.
I see. Just going back, and I'm sorry to go back to this bullet point about M2FH or FLONOPS. Was there a need at any stage during the night to free up the main scheme radio?
No.
I see. Okay. We're going to come back, I think, to the RIF shortly. I just want to go back into, if I can, policy 790. And I'm sorry to dot around these policies. If you look at 790, which is in tab 5 of the policy bundle, and go please to paragraph 7.8. If we can just have that highlighted. And that says control, and I should just tell you, this sits within the section of this policy that is entitled Recording and Sharing of Information. It says control has a command unit critical phone line which has a higher priority than calls to the officer of the watch. This number is programmed into CU phones and must only be used for passing life critical information. We discussed earlier today the different methods of communication and lines between the control room and the incident ground.
Yes.
Is which one of those is the command unit critical phone line?
So that would have been a call into, so an admin call would have come through an admin line into our IX to be answered. It would have been labelled command unit critical, and Officer of the Watch's supervisors would have prioritised the picking up of that telephone number or that telephone call rather than normal Officer of the Watch calls.
Right. So that's a line between the command unit and control, is it?
Yes.
Is it another designated line, or is it?
Yes, so the command unit phones have a designated number programmed in that would come through to our IX and show that it was a command unit critical. So in normal practice, in relation to this policy, when the CU, the FSG CU is established, we would expect that them to ring control using that telephone number.
Right. And that's from the command unit telephone itself, not the radio, not the mobile.
No.
Right.
The
Okay.
command unit telephone.
So it's the same phone line but a different number. Is that right?
It's a different telephone number.
Yes.
It would come through on our communications, our integrated communication system.
And who would it go to? Who would pick that up? In the control
Usually
room?
a supervisor.
Right. And who would determine the priority? Sorry, let me ask that question a different way. The paragraph suggests that that line is to be used for calls that have a higher priority than calls to the officer of the watch. What are calls which have a higher priority than calls that would be made to the officer of the watch?
So I think that's just the terminology. It doesn't mean that it's being prioritised. Calls to the officer of the watch could come from anywhere. They're just admin calls. They could be officers just wanting an update. But obviously, if the command unit is phoning us, we have critical information to pass them, and they want to share that with us. So we would just prioritise it in the control room to pick it up first, rather than an officer of the watch call.
I see. Okay. And do you know if that command unit critical phone line was used on the night of Grenfell?
No, it wasn't, because I believe we preempted that, and Jason Olive rung the command unit before the command unit had a chance to ring us.
Right, I see. Okay. And then you were operating by mobile, I think, Jason
Yes.
Olive to CU8
Yes.
directly. Okay. Now, while a call is progressing and a CRO is on a 999 call with a caller, how does the call handler, the CRO, simultaneously communicate with the incident ground?
So they do that via the radio operator. So whilst they're talking to the caller, they will create a service request
I see.
and put that information on and then send that to the radio operator, who will then pass that to the ICP.
I see. So it's essentially typing while talking.
Yes.
I follow. Can I just see if I can illustrate that with you by a number of examples? Can I ask you to go to the short incident log? You just put the policy bundle away for the moment. Tab 23 of the documents bundle. You can see on page 23, we just go to that. I'm so sorry, page 19. And this is, again, it's just an example. We can see an entry at 014047. HJF. Service request. I think, is that Heidi Fox?
Yes.
Okay. Service request. Service request created RT4 to G271. FYI, 7 people in flat 205 on 23rd floor. Persons unable to leave property. That message is attributed to HJF, Heather Fox. Would she be the call? Would she be the call handler, the CRO call handler, or would she be the radio operator?
No, she'd be the call handler.
Right.
Talking to those people.
Okay. And so while she was talking to those people at that time, just explain to me the process whereby the service request is created in the system which produces
So while she was
short
talking
incident
to them, she would have called up a service request and she would have written in a box those details with regard to the 7 people in flat 205 on the 23rd floor. And then she would have closed that request and it would have gone into a list for the radio operator on Channel 4 to pick up, so Sharon Darby.
Right. And then Sharon Darby picks it up from her screen.
Yes.
And then talk me through the next steps.
And then relays that to the instant command point.
By a radio.
By
RT4.
radio, yes.
And you say it would have gone into a list for the radio
Yes.
operator. What does the radio operator see on his or her screen, Sharon Darby in this case?
So it would be the same as control operators have seen. There is a box on the... We talked about the instant list. They also have a service request list. And everyone is able to access that list.
Right.
But the prefix, as I said, RT4, would have meant that it was to go out to the radio operator.
Right. And does Heidi Fox write in RT4 to G271?
Yes.
So it's the call handler who decides, if you like, which incident command pump or CU gets entered into the request, which is then sent to the radio operator.
Yes, but I think with regard to Gulf 271, she put Gulf 271 because she knew that there was appliance in attendance there. I'd say the radio operator would have relocated it if the instant command pump had changed.
That's
so
where I was going.
So if it had become CU8, then the radio operator would have passed it to CU8.
Okay. We're going to come, I think, to some of this in some detail, but just in terms of the process, I think you're saying that it's Heidi Fox who inputs G271 there.
Yes.
And then that message goes to Sharon Darby as the radio operator, but Sharon Darby would know whether the incident command pump was still G271 or had changed.
Yes, because she would have been taking all the radio messages from the incident. So
Right.
at some point they would have declared a new instant command point. So she would have been aware of that.
Let's just drilling down on that. Where would Sharon Darby get that information from?
From the scene, from the incident ground.
From the incident ground. So
Yeah.
she would be dependent on somebody on the incident ground saying to her, don't send radio messages to G271 anymore, send them to CU8. Or
Yeah, a more simplistic version, they would have said CU8 is now ICP.
And that message would come to Sharon Darby over what system?
The airwave radio, the main scheme radio.
The main scheme radio?
Yes.
So back through RT4?
Yes.
Right. And that would be recorded, would it?
Yes.
Okay. And would Sharon Darby then input that change into the vision system?
Yes, she would record that message.
Okay. All right. Looking at this log on this page, the messages go from RT4 to G271 in that example. If, and it is an if, the incident ground pump or incident ground command unit had changed, we wouldn't know that from this log, would we?
Yes, you'd have a message that would say CU8 is now ICP
Well,
at some point.
I'm not sure we do. We certainly do see messages a little bit later that RT4 messages go to CU8. But let me try my question a different way. If Sharon Darby is seeing a message come from Heather, sorry, I keep calling her Heather, Heidi Fox, which says RT4 to G271, but Sharon Darby knows that actually G271 is now not the right pump, it's supposed to go to a command unit. She makes that decision herself, but we don't see that recorded in the incident log. We don't see the message going to to command unit 8.
No, it would remain as going to Gulf 71. You would just see when Sharon had told the ICP, because you would have service request completed.
Yes, okay. So I see. So this incident log, the short incident log, it doesn't tell you actually where the radio message went, which is the message that we see against the name of the control room operator.
You could confirm that by listening to the recordings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. Another example, 145.10, SAD, service request, again, RT4 to G271, FYI 7 people in flat 205 on 23rd floor, persons unable to leave property. That's the same message that we saw Heidi Fox sending to Sharon Darby.
Yes.
When we see this one at 014510, what is happening there? Is that because this is Sharon Darby this time?
Yes, and that tells us that she's completed and sent that message via voice.
Right.
To the incident.
And would she be able to correct the reference to the incident command pump if in fact she was sending it to a command pump which was not G271?
I'm not sure if you can change service requests.
Right.
No.
Because
I would imagine she could, but I wouldn't imagine that it would be a detail. As you can see the timeline,
right.
Sharon is constantly on the radio talking to the command point at that point, and in control we would know that it was going to the designated place.
Because, and the reason I ask is because by this time it's at least possible that CU8 was receiving information by mobile, actually, directly from, or by telephone at least, but from the control room.
From Jason Olive?
No, because he wasn't there until 2 o'clock. But if Command Unit 8 was receiving information by telephone from the control room, would that be reflected in this message at 014510 or not?
No.
Right. So am I right in thinking the short incident log is only reflecting messages sent by radio?
No, it does show some additions to the incident log that wouldn't go through a service request, I believe.
Okay. Would it show information being communicated from the control room by telephone?
So not automatically, it would mean that a control room operator or a supervisor would update the incident log with their actions,
Right.
which they do normally do. So there would be an entry in there to say that they'd contacted the command unit and passed details to them.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
I think it is, yes.
I'm still slightly midstream with this, but I think it's probably convenient to.
Right.
Miss
We'll,
Smith,
we'll have a short
a
break
long
now.
hour.
Um, 3:25, please. Thank you very much. And no talking to anyone about your evidence. Thank you. (3:25), please.
Chairman, yes, can we have the...
No, no, witness is coming. All right, carry on.
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
Yes, Mr. Millett.
Ms. Smith, thank you very much for coming back to us. Can I just continue then with my examples and a study of the short incident log again? We've got Sharon Darby. We were looking at this one at 0145 10, and she's on the radio. Is she, just to go back to this, is she the one who creates this message and inputs it into the system?
The 145.10, no.
Right, so
That would have been the previous, that would have been a service request created, and that would have been from Heidi Fox.
that's how, I see, okay. And when, so when we see 014510 SAD, service request completed, what is Sharon Darby's role in generating that message at
So
145?
she would have passed that message on to the instant command pump.
Right.
And
Now-
once that had been sent, she would have completed that service request.
Right. Now, where we see, and just, I think you said this before, just that I'm clear, Sharon Darby was the radio message operator all night at Grenfell, was she?
Yes.
Okay. So where we see SAD next to a message, can we be, in this document, can we be confident that message was either typed in by her or approved by her?
It would have been typed in by her and created by her, or she would have passed that information
Right.
over to the command pump to allow it to be completed.
So where we see here, as we do, service request completed RT4 to G271 next to Sharon Darby's name,
Yeah.
can we be confident that she communicated with or sent to G271 the message we can see there?
I wouldn't be confident that she sent it to Gulf 271. She could have passed it to Gulf 271, but I would imagine she would have directed it to the instant command pump or whoever we'd last received a message from.
Right. Would she, coming back to a point I asked you about, I think just a little before the break, would she have any means of correcting the message so as to show that the message she'd sent by RT4 radio was sent no longer, not to G271, but to CU8? Would she be able to make that correction?
Yes, she could have.
She could.
She could have done that, but I wouldn't have said that would have been. That's really irrelevant in regard to our documentation and our communication. We know it was sent. We know it would have been sent to the incident ground and to the ICP.
Right. Now, can I just ask you then to look at page 21 and just to look at two examples. We have a service request. This is at page 21, timed at 2:06:06. Service request, and this is again Heidi Fox, RT4 to CU8. Further call times 2 adults and 1 child trapped inside flat 82 on floor 11. Now that's clearly a message being sent to CU8. Heidi Fox handling the call, Sharon Darby on the radio.
Yes.
And we see that that's the creation of that, and we see the completion of that is at 02:10:09. You see that?
Yes.
And that is again RT4 to CU8. And I think that, and what you told us before, is Heidi Fox handling the call, sends the message to Sharon Darby radio to CU8, and she then sends the message, which is completing the service request.
Yes.
Right. Now, between those two, between the creation and the completion of that service request, we've also got a new service request from PD, just above it at 020908, service request created RT4 to G271, firing corridor floor 12, caller track flap 95. PD would be the would be the CRO
Yes.
handling the 999 call.
Yes.
And again, he would send. Is this right? He would send that message to Sharon Darby, who would then create this message, this radio message.
Yes, that's correct.
Would Sharon Darby realise, at least by that time, that radio messages were being sent to two different command pumps, one G271 and the other CU8?
No, you'd have to confirm with the radio traffic, but I
Right.
believe Sharon would have been aware from the beginning of where to send the radio messages. So even though Pete Daddy's call says Golf 271 and the other one says to Charlie Uniform 8, they would have both gone to Charlie Uniform 8.
Okay. And then at 2:10:21, we see Sharon Darby service request completed RT4 to G271. Given that she's just 12 seconds before, completed a service request RT4 to CU8, do you know why she creates a service request to G271?
She doesn't. She just completes that service request.
Right. And why doesn't she correct the destination of the message?
If you just have a look at the instant log, so the service requests are created and completed. She's passing all that radio traffic.
Right.
She's also receiving 2 make-up messages in between that time and processing those and sending out her own service requests to get those actions. Again,
Right.
if you've heard the radio traffic, it's quite a formal process of where we pass short bursts of information and then the appliance repeats those back to confirm understanding.
Right.
So it's not a very quick action in all, and the amount of action she's doing in between 2:06 and 2:11, combined with the fact that she would have sent it to the instant command point, I don't think she sees any need to, and I would understand that.
And when we see service request completed RT4 to G271, as we do at 2:10:21 SAD, with the system that Sharon Darby was operating, would she have got a confirmation back from G271?
No, I believe she would have passed it to CU8,
Right.
and they would have acknowledged that.
Okay.
Can I just clarify this? The picture I'm getting from this series of answers is that in a case like this, take this one we've been looking at, PD formulates a service request,
Yes.
and he may or may not know where it's going to be sent to, but he thinks it's going to G271. So he formulates it in that way, and Sharon Darby simply copies it as it stands, but sends it, I think you're telling us, to where it ought to go.
Yes.
And when she gets a confirmation, she confirms that the message as originally formulated has been the subject of action, but she does not say, actually, I sent it to CU8. Is that what you're
Yes.
really saying to us?
Yes.
Yes,
That's what I'm
right,
saying.
thank you.
So the pertinent information would be to get across the fire in the corridor, floor 12,
Yeah.
and not the...
And no one reformulates the original
No.
form of the message. No. Sorry, Mr. Millett.
No, that's helpful. And just one or two more questions. Taking us through a little bit later into the night on this same or similar topic. If you can please go to page 22. It says 022333 SAD key CU7 run all FSG calls via CU7. Do you see that?
Yes.
022333. If you can just have that highlighted there. That's clear. She creates that message. But, and if we look lower down at 022532, and this may be the same answer that the chairman asked you about. There's a service request completed, RT4 to CU8. and that looks like it completes a service request that Heidi Fox has created in respect of that flat 183, at 022411. Just see that. I'm asking
Yes.
this sort of slightly backwards, but because I'm starting with Sharon Darby. But it looks from that that although FSG calls were now to be run via CU7, as Sharon Darby has recorded, other people in the control room, such as Heidi Fox, handling calls, are still creating messages as if they're going to go to CU8, and Sharon Darby is completing them on that basis. But you think they're actually being sent to CU7?
Yes, Sharon would have received that message from CU7 to say run all FSG calls via CU7. So she would have heard that message come in from
Right.
CU7 and typed that on the incident log.
Right.
Heidi, who was call taking and not near Sharon, maybe wouldn't have heard that message to pick up on that and still believes it's going to CU8.
I see.
However, once Sharon completed that, she would have sent that to CU7.
Yes, I see. Okay. So I think we can get from this discussion and the chairman's question that what you don't get out of the incident log is the precise incident command pump or CU to which Sharon Darby is sending the radio messages, because she will have corrected them as she went, even though when she was completing the messages, she was completing messages created by control room operators.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Can I go back then to a slightly different question, which is fire survival guidance advice given by CROs to callers. One of the things we saw, one of the four things we saw in the policy 790 was reassurance. Is it quite common for CROs to reassure callers by saying the crews are on their way?
Yes.
Okay. In your experience, does offering that reassurance have an effect on the mind of the caller in terms of how they then go about assessing the risks to themselves of fire, smoke and heat?
I don't think I could answer that confidently. It would depend on the caller. Every call is different.
Yeah.
We would try and reassure them. Again, we could say that the fire crews were on the way, which would be factual, and we would tell them that they were on the way or they were en route. Sometimes we tell them how far away they are to try and allay their fears.
Right.
But it would depend on the individual operator as to what they say with regard to reassurance next. We can exchange names to put them in a calmer position and to make them feel like, you know, we're a lifeline to them.
Right.
While we're waiting for the crews to turn up as well.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to say if we lulled them into
No.
a position of safety.
No. And forgive this question, but I feel I must ask it. But is there a chance or a risk that when a CRO says to a caller that the crews are on their way, that might induce a false sense of security in the caller, so that they wouldn't actually be able to go about assessing the risk of smoke, fire and heat accurately?
They would drop in and out of assessment, reassessment and reassurance. So they wouldn't go through the stages. They might say they're reassuring they're on the way, and then they might ask how the conditions are doing next.
I see.
And so it would depend on those answers.
Right. Can I now take you back to policy 790 and ask you to look at paragraph 9.1. This is tab 5 of the policy bundle. And I want to discuss with you communications between the incident ground and the control room. And I think we've probably covered quite a lot of this already, but I just want to see if I can go back to some specific questions in the policy. Section 9 of this policy is entitled Communication with Control. And 9.1 says, it is vital that control is kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call. The fact that control is aware of the actions being carried out on the incident ground will greatly enhance the advice given to FSG callers. in the normal course of things, how is control kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve FSG calls?
So in a normal course, a fire survival guidance call, we wouldn't have much liaison with the incident ground. We'd know when they were in attendance. They might send a message within the first 5 minutes, but it is norm to know that the first sign that we know that the individuals are being rescued is to hear the firefighters in the background, or the caller tell us that they can hear firefighters in the background.
Right. I mean, it looks from this section of the policy that the intention is that control is given quite a lot of information by the incident ground and on a continuing basis. Is that your experience?
Yes, I would agree with how the policy reads.
Right. That's how the policy reads. And
Yes.
in your experience, is that how the policy is carried into effect?
Not as... No, we are very rarely kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve fire survival guidance calls,
Right.
in my experience.
Okay. How would a CRO who is on a call with a caller know what has happened, or know what's been happening, or know what is happening on the ground, the incident ground, so as to be able to enhance the advice that CRO is giving to an FSG caller?
So that they wouldn't, it would come in through the radio, I would imagine, through the main scheme radio, to the radio operator. That information will be directed to the supervisor, and a supervisor may then pass that on to the control room officer. They might hear it if they were sitting close by to the radio, but...
Paragraph 9.2 says, informative messages from the incident ground should also contain an update on progress relating to those specific FSG calls by both the flat house number to avoid confusion. Informative messages are a particular kind of message, I think.
Yes.
And there is, just help me understand that. I think we discussed this before. There is a sort of standard format, aren't they?
Yes.
And we've seen some examples of that in the short incident log. Would you expect any other kind of messages to come from the incident ground other than informative messages?
In regard to fire survival guidance calls, on occasion they might pass additional information regarding if they've managed to reach individuals. But as I've said before, if we're on the phone to a caller, we would be able to hear that in the background, that they are reaching them and that they are trying to break in or rescuing them.
Right. And how would an informative message be communicated to the CRO handling the call?
So it would come from the incident commander usually via the main scheme radio to the radio operator, who would then log that message, and highlight it to the supervisor.
Okay. And highlighting it to the supervisor, how would that be done? By message or by...
That would be done by service request.
By service request, even within the control room?
Yes.
Okay. And that's, you say supervisor, is that the officer of the watch or?
Yes, the officer of the watch.
Officer of the watch, okay. And 9.3 says the outcome of every FSG call must be communicated to control. How would that normally be done, if at all?
I've never experienced that happening.
Right. Okay. So, can I take from your evidence that in relation to 9.1, 9.2 and 9.3, that's the policy, but the practice is very different?
I've never been in the control room when that's happened. Yeah.
Okay. Can I now turn at last, I think, probably to your role on the night. Now, in your witness statement, and we can go to it at page 1, you say in the third paragraph, you were, in the third line, you were the on-call management on the night of the fire. What does that mean? What does that involve?
So we provide 24-hour senior management cover for the control room, and it's split into a rota. And on the night of that, I was the brigade, what we call the brigade duty control manager. So there's a certain criteria for control operators and supervisors to follow about informing us of incidents, staff welfare issues, mobilising system problems, and incidents. So they would have paged me.
Right. And you say when you're on call, and this is the last sentence of the first paragraph, you say, we respond to pager communications and phone in to assess situations in the first instance before deciding whether attendance is necessary.
Yes.
What criteria determine whether your attendance is necessary?
It really depends on the situation. So we have a basic criteria of attending the control room above, for instance, above 12 pumping appliances. But it would depend on the severity, if there was a mobilising issue with our system, it would depend on the severity of that, and we would assess that during a phone conversation to the officer of the watch.
I see. Is there a particular makeup which would automatically trigger your attendance at the control room?
Yes, 12 pumps and above, or above 12 pumps, sorry.
Above 12?
Yeah.
So, right. And who would page you? For example, in the case of a 12 pump, 13 pump fire, you probably don't have 13 pump fires,
no.
but in the case of an attendance above 12, who would page you?
It would be a plan item on an incident, and it would be one of the officers of the watches that would page me.
Right, okay. And once you've decided that you must attend, are there any norms or targets which say how long you should take to get to the incident, to get to the control room?
I believe at one time there was about an hour and a half
right.
time
At
for
the time
us to journeying in, but I'm not sure if that still exists anymore.
Right. At the time of Grenfell, was there an operational target?
No.
Okay. When you're at Merton, I mean, obviously don't tell us please where you live, but when you're at Merton, how long does it usually take you to get to the control room?
5 minutes.
Right. And Stratford?
30 minutes.
And is it right that attendance at the control room is a matter of urgency for you once you're paged?
Yes, we're blue light trains and we journey on blue lights when we're
right.
paged.
Okay. Now, on page 3 of your statement, you say that this is the top of the page. On the night of the 13th, 14th of June, I was working a normal day shift, but was on call that night. At approximately 1:15 hours, I received a page regarding an 8-pump fire. Normal procedure is that anything that is 8-pump or more requires senior operations managers to be notified. Now, you said a minute ago that you would be normally notified at 12 and above, or above 12.
Attending at 12, but notified of 8.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. Now, in fact, we have this incident going pumps 8 at 1:19 or so.
Yes, I think it was more like 1:30.
More like 1:30, okay. And Where were you when you got the pager?
At home,
At home. Asleep?
yes.
And what, at that stage, when you got the page, what tasks or responsibilities do you have, or did you have?
So I'd contact the supervisor of the officer watch at the back of the room and ask some details. They'd probably provide me instantly with some details about the incident and how the control room was coping with that. I'm sure each of us have a different sort of questions to ask when we ring up and respond to a pager message.
Right.
I like to know how it's impacting in control, and if our mobilising system is performing effectively.
Right. Now, who did you speak to when you called in? Do you remember?
I think initially I spoke to Pete May.
Right. Can I just ask you to look, and this is just to time triangulation, if I can, to verify this. Can I ask you to look at the operational response report at page 48? And at 01:29:41, we can see Bravo Charlie 02, Senior Operations Manager, SOM, Joanne Smith, who is the Duty Brigade Control Senior Manager, is paged and notified of the incident. Now, you said about 1:30, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what, as you record it?
Yes.
Right. Now, at that stage, in fact, did you know that the fire had just been made up to 20 pumps?
No.
Okay. Did you find that out after that?
Yes. So I think when I'm on my way, when I'm en route, my pager actuates again.
Right. Do you know why you were paged only after the make-up had reached 20?
It would have been an action that they would have been processing at an 8-pump fire, but the rapid make-up, obviously they were getting the resources, the immediate resources to the incident first, and carrying out a number of paging tasks, and then they would have got down to paging the Brigade Control Duty Manager.
Right. We have make pumps 8 at 01:19:08.
Yes.
So, in your experience, would it ordinarily take 10 minutes to be for the page to come through to you?
It could do, and on this occasion, between the make pumps 8 and completing the action lists, I believe they had a number of other make-ups that they needed to prioritise.
Yes. Okay. So would it be right to say that, in fact, you should have been paged 10 minutes earlier when it was at 8 pumps and not at 01:29 when it had reached 20?
No, I think it would have been right and proper for them to, as they did, prioritise the sending and mobilising of resources to the incident. They can only do one action at a time, with 3 of them undertaking those actions. I think they did pretty well to page me within 10 minutes.
Okay. And you say on page 3 that I called in, I could hear background noise that indicated the control room was incredibly busy. When you say you called in, what did you call in on?
I rang one of the admin lines
Right.
that speaks to the officer of the watch.
Okay. Did you call on your personal mobile? Or
My
was it
brigade mobile.
your brigade mobile?
Yes.
Okay. So, in terms of your personal radio or communications equipment, what did you carry with you that night? You had your brigade mobile.
I had a brigade mobile phone and we are issued with airwave radios, handhelds, same as senior officers.
Okay. And is there a reason why you used the brigade mobile to call in and not the airwave radio?
Because most senior officers, when they're responding to a page, will ring in the officer of the watch to talk to them about the incident prior to being ordered on. So they would only communicate with the radio if they were booking status 2, status 3.
Yes, I see. Okay. All right. And you can have a conversation on a telephone
Yes.
you can't have on a radio.
Much easier.
Yes, I see. Okay. And do you remember who you spoke to? I think you said Pete May. Is that right?
I believe I spoke to Pete May first when he informed me the 8-pump fire, and when I rang up again, I believe I spoke to Debbie Real.
Okay. And what did, on the initial call, what did Pete May tell you? Do you remember?
Not specific detail. I believe he said he'd gone up to 10, maybe, but I would be guessing.
Okay. Can we just continue in this document, the ORR, and look at page 68? And here we have another call. This is I'll wait for it to come up. This is 013908. SOM Smith calls brigade control for an update. She is told by AOM Real that it's going absolutely crazy and they are taking lots of FSG calls. SOM Smith asks if there are any long FSG calls where people are on the line. She's advised OM Norman is on the line to someone. SOM Smith also checks if the vision system is coping and instructs AOM Real to prioritise the FSG calls over the resource management log notifications and confirms she will be attending Stratford. Is that the second call that you were referring to?
Yes, that was made en route.
Now, I think, in fact, we've got the transcript of that call, so we can look at more precisely what you were saying there. But do you remember making that call?
Yes.
Okay. The transcript is. Are you all right?
Before you go on, are you feeling all right?
Yes. No, I'm fine, thank you.
Just about to ask that same question. Are you okay to look at a transcript
Yes.
of a call on the night?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do that. It's in the master documents bundle at tab 65. And the reference is INQ 198. Lots of zeros before it. And this is a transcript. And at the top it says, control admin line 013908 from BCO2. That's you, BCO2.
Yes.
And it's only a couple of pages, and we can see that. And Officer of the Watch is Debbie Real.
Yes.
Okay. And she says, you say it's Joanne. She says, oh, all right, it's going absolutely crazy. And you say, I know, Debbie. Are you in charge, or is Chris? When you say, I know, Debbie, did you already know that it was, as it were, going crazy?
I must have, or I could hear it in the background.
Okay. On what? In the control room?
In the control room. You
Okay.
could visibly hear the noise
Right.
when you rang in.
Did it sound unusual to you?
Yes, it sounded extremely busy.
Right. And Debbie says to you in the next part, Alex is in charge, we're getting loads of calls, fire survival guidance calls, it's just gone absolutely manic. You know it's a 25 pump fire now. You say, I did hear yes. And that just for information is about 131, so that had just gone 25. And then you ask, just below halfway down, okay, are we all right? Have we got any long ones? And you ask the same question. A little bit lower down, have we got any ones that are prolonged? Are we on the phone? And my question is, why were you asking about long calls?
Just in my experience, they are the most difficult. They are quite traumatic. And it gave you a sense of what was happening. So it gave me a bit of situational awareness before I had got to the control room.
Yeah. Okay. And is there a particular length of time in your head, or was there, that was significant for a call?
Yes, so part of our fire survival guidance training, we are instructed to have a session about building construction and fire behaviour. And again, it's that compartment being able to withstand roughly an hour, and that was in my mind.
Okay. Can I just complete the evidential picture by showing you something? Just because
Okay.
I think there's something you should look at which may just complete the picture in document terms. If you go to tab 54, it's the control debrief manuscript document. It's what we looked at earlier. And at page 5, I'm so sorry, this is LFB 00003113 at page 5. And I'm interested in your last answer. I just want to pin it down to a document. You can see 2/3 of the way down that page, and just to remind you, this is the manuscript note of the review, the control debrief. It says next to a bullet point, has Lacanol in mind 1 hour time mark. What's that? What is that a reference to, do you think?
So the 1 hour time mark,
Yes,
is the compartmentation beginning to break down, as I've already said. And Lacanol in mind was that I'm aware that our control had been in a similar situation with the Lacanol incident,
right. So the
where
hour.
they'd been on the phone for a prolonged period of time, talking to callers in distress.
Okay. So if somebody has been on a fire survival guidance call for an hour, what does that tell you as a supervising officer?
For me, it would tell me that the crews are having difficulty putting out the fire or reaching that caller, and that we would have run through everything we could have done to help that caller, and that we would have given them and tried to protect them as much as we could.
Yeah. Are you all right to continue for another
Yes.
10 minutes or so?
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Millett, how are you getting on this afternoon? I mean, if you've got
Very
a...
well, I think. No, I'm getting on very well, and we're going to continue into tomorrow.
We are in any event.
In any event, I'm certainly not going to finish, I'm afraid, tonight, and we weren't planning to. So on the timetable. So
I didn't inquire as a matter of criticism.
No,
because I wonder whether we're getting towards the end of the day for this witness. It's been quite.
we are,
testing
and if
day.
we stopped now, that would be no difficulties as far as I'm concerned at all.
Have you reached a sensible point? I mean, we could
not
carry on
quite.
for 5 minutes or so, but I sense you'd quite like to break off, wouldn't you?
5 minutes is fine. I'll be happy to carry on
Well,
for 5 to 10
council's
minutes.
5 minutes. And not,
It's a bit longer.
but, is this a sensible point in your questioning, Mr. Millett?
Not completely, no.
Well, would you like to find a completely or more completely sensible point?
sensible point, yes.
But not more than, let's say, 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Now,
Thank you.
in your witness statement on page 3, you refer to this conversation with Debbie Rial, who says, and you say, who informed me that they were dealing with multiple FSGs at the scene, and I advised her that I would be in within 30 minutes. When she told you that, and I think that's a summary, obviously, when she told you that, what did you think you were going in to face?
An extremely busy control room, noisy, but it was. demands being made of all our control officers and our supervisors to mobilise resources and to provide information.
Now, what this transcript and what your statement doesn't, I think, record is what fire survival guidance was actually being given to the control room, to callers by the control room staff. Do you remember? Did you know what that fire survival guidance would have been?
Yes, that they would have spoken to each individual caller, and that caller would have indicated that they cannot leave their premise, and then they would have provided advice depending on the location of that caller.
Okay. So is it right that at that stage you were assuming that the practice based on the policy would be being followed by the CROs?
Yes.
I see, okay. And given that there were lots of people trapped in their flats who were being given FSG advice, what did that tell you about how the fire was behaving, if anything?
I didn't really focus on how the fire was behaving, if I'm honest. I was more focused on what advice we could give to those callers and how we could assist those, as were our control officers.
Okay.
So with regard to smoke and the impact of that fire, yes, we were considering that, but not what fire behaviour was at the time.
Now, we don't see either in the ORR or in the transcript of the call anything about asking what the operational plan was at the scene. But did you have any thoughts at the time about finding out what was actually going on the ground?
No, not at the time while I was en route. I didn't know.
Okay. And so you had your brigade mobile with you, but you also had your airwave radio.
Yeah.
And could you hear on the airwave radio what was happening?
Yes, but I must admit I didn't listen to it all the way through.
Okay, all right. I think that is probably a convenient moment.
Good. Yes, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry that we haven't been able to finish your evidence today. I'm going to have to ask you to come back tomorrow.
Okay.
But I think if we tried to finish it tonight, we'd be here for a very long time, at least much longer than you'd like to be here. So I'm going to ask you to leave us now, and we'll resume at 10 o'clock. Is that, I hope, not
Yes.
going to inconvenience you?
No, not at all.
All right, it's 10 o'clock tomorrow then, and again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence overnight.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you very much.
Let's go with the usher. Well, very good, Mr. Millett. Give us a little bit of a hint as to where we're going to be tomorrow.
We will be most of tomorrow, but I'll have another look at my notes overnight.
Do you think most of tomorrow with this witness?
I do think so, and I should just also say that it is very likely that some call participants will have further questions as a result of today's evidence and questions as we go during tomorrow, and it's right that I should give them an opportunity, even a short opportunity, to collate those and give them to me so that I can consider them.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a very important witness in that sense. So.
Well, it might be sensible at various points to have, and we shall have the usual breaks anyway.
Yes, indeed, absolutely.
And it may be that it would be convenient when you get to the end of the questions that you currently want to ask to have another break.
Yes.
So that there can be some consideration of further questions.
Absolutely. We have been trying to do that as we go. It's been dependent on each individual witness, but I think with this one it's particularly important. Yeah. I think it's also important not to rush this evidence. So if we do end up taking all day tomorrow, I do not think that will affect the timetable adversely.
Good, very well. Thank you. 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please.